it really feels like we're doing everything that we can to frame Donald Trump's actions in a hyper charitable way, but only be distrust. When you say you're distrustful of power, it feels like the only power that you're distrustful of is Joe Biden. Because if you were actually distrustful of power, you would probably be concerned about the guy who just won his re-election campaign, who's saying that he wants to terminate the Constitution. How's
What's
it
up,
going?
gentlemen?
How's it going, Evil Wizard? I like your profile
Doing
picture.
good. Thank you, The Undertaker.
Yeah,
Hello.
I'm a big pro wrestling guy.
Can you
I
make
just
that?
I don't. I'm I'm a pro-authoritarian guy, and Trump is not authoritarian.
Why is it that the only people that will come up are fucking pro-authoritarian guys?
Because I've seen the way like democracies have fumbled over the last 1,000 years. I mean, I guess that's every system of government. Is no matter what, the bad people are going to weasel their way to the top and take advantage of everybody else. That seems to be just how politics go in nature. So it's just picking your poison. Would you rather live in a communist authoritarian or a national socialist authoritarian or a pseudo oligarchical authoritarian? It's kind of pick your poison, really. Like no matter what, the government's always going to suck. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
So
Trump is not
no matter what, just
authoritarian.
democracy is damned.
Democracy, every form of government, really.
This
Very
is
valid.
a very good point.
It's hyper hard to argue with like just pure nihilism, where it's just like, oh, we're all gonna unalive at the end anyway. So what's the point of doing anything?
I mean, I guess so, but
It's like I can't fucking argue against that.
yeah, no, it's kind of an irrefutable point.
So
But I guess
the point that I would make is that Donald Trump went through efforts to undo the democratic will of the people in 2020, which would be wildly expanding presidential power. And I think the people should have checked him before putting him back into office, but the people didn't. So that's why I'd say Donald Trump is authoritarian, is because he has interest in expanding
gotta
his
disagree
presidential
with you
powers.
there. I do have to disagree with you. I think that shit at the Capitol was probably the lamest thing I've ever seen in my life, and the only person that died was a civilian.
Be
Like,
careful.
I-
say unalived if you can. Thank
Oh,
you.
sorry,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
No, you're good.
Used to that.
You're good.
But yeah, no, I think that was not only hoax and like fake, but it was just stupid. Like I don't see why everyone's like, "Oh my god, the attack on our democracy," when it's just a bunch of like rednecks showing up and like, "Yeah, we gotta support Mr. Trump," and like that was it.
Okay.
People selling T-shirts and shit.
So are you aware of the actions that Donald Trump took surrounding that event and not just at the Capitol?
Well, yeah, he tried to say that the election was stolen, and it was pretty evidently stolen. It
Well,
was pretty obvious.
are you familiar with the electors plot?
No, I'm not. Can you enlighten me?
Yeah. So around 2020, Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. We all know that. And then he tried to assemble a group of lawyers to get the results overturned. And how he did that was he hired this lawyer named John Eastman, and Kenneth Chesborough like set the foundations. But I'm giving like a hyper simplified version of this. And John Eastman wrote this memo called the J6 scenario, where he proposed this thing where they would come up with fraudulent slates of electors, or a slates of electors that were not certified by the respective state governments, and they would ask Mike Pence on the joint session in which they certify electoral votes to choose the Trump electors that were not sent with the permission of the state over the ones that the state certified to be sent. What this would do is it would give electoral votes that were designated for Joe Biden to Donald Trump without the certification by the states, without any interference other than Mike Pence just determining that that's what they should do. It was a plot to basically steal the election, and we have evidence of all of it. So, and the reason that people were invading the Capitol on January 6th in particular is because that is where that joint session where they certify the electoral votes happens.
Oh yeah, I know that. I mean, I know that. I guess my biggest takeaway that I mean, don't get me wrong, I do not like Trump. Don't mistake me for a maggot. But I gotta say, I think we can all agree that every presidential election has been ordained for like 200 years. It's probably even longer than that. But it was made to look like it was stolen. I gotta say, in 2020, they quote unquote did steal the election. It was pretty clear that there was some fraudulent actions happening around the voting.
I hyper disagree, but we have to be careful with what we talk about. Just by extension of it's TikTok's really touchy about certain conspiracies and whatever, but if we look at all of the people that were tasked to investigate it, we saw the Georgia investigators say there was no fraud. We saw the FBI come out, and the DOJ and the DHS all come out and say there was no fraud. The 62 lawsuits were filed to challenge the election, and all of them came back with goose eggs. We had the largest defamation case. We had the largest defamation case in American history settle in favor of Dominion voting machines after they sued Fox News for claims of fraud. We have Rudy Giuliani admitting that he lied about election fraud findings. We have Jenna Ellis and Kenneth Chesbrough pleading guilty to the Georgia indictment. Like, every single thing, every single person that was tasked to investigate fraud in 2020 found nothing.
I could argue that those are all biased sources that got paid off. I mean, you can't trust these people, and you can't trust any of them. They're all politicians, you know.
If we're at the point where we're saying 62 separate judges were all paid off to rule against Donald
absolutely.
Trump,
Of course, they're tools of the machine. They're tools of the war machine. Of course.
well, then what we're going to get to is that you just don't have any evidence of that, and then that's it.
My evidence
That's like
is
I'm the
on
only
that.
person that remembers the fact that the poll watchers refuse to let people go in and watch the fucking polls, and the mysterious boxes of ballots showing up, and the Dominion machines.
Okay, be careful. Well, let's not get into too many conspiracies, but I would say that, one, there's a specific process by which poll watchers are allowed to watch the polls. Some of them weren't denied, and it was claimed that they were. Some of them just weren't supposed to be there. Like, they were there at not allotted times. Like, that's a normal case. Also, the black box video, the big pulling ballots out of suitcases or whatever, that is what Rudy Giuliani admitted in court to lying about. So this is the problem, is that, like, the way that we count votes is very complicated, but to act like it's not, and to try and hyper-simplify it down and act like you found evidence of fraud that somehow everyone didn't seem to notice, or that those 62 judges had to be paid off to deny, like what even is the incentive for that? Like, is the DNC so powerful that they can just, like, bribe every judge in America and independent people that the Trump campaign hired to okay, like, we're in conspiracy land, and all of that is unfalsifiable and can never be proven or disproven. It's just,
I think it's moot points trying to cherry pick different topics that support your view, because all of it can be considered biased. This is the age of AI and media and, you know, all this internet shit that can be easily fake. You know what I mean?
Just saying something is fake does not make it fake. That's all I'd say. Like, the conspiracy that you're proposing, that the DNC paid off all of the independent investigators that the Trump campaign hired, all of the independent investigators from the states, all of the judges that they had to pay off to rule against Donald Trump, and there's not any single piece of evidence for it. Like, that, it's impossible.
What would you consider evidence for that? What would be considered non-valuable evidence?
A single person coming out and saying that the DNC paid them to rule against Donald Trump and say that they hadn't found fraud, even though they had. I mean, but we have the exact opposite. We have Giuliani coming out and saying that he lied about it.
I mean, I guess I would have to see that to really, like, look into it, but
yeah, but I can explain the details. So, in a case, there's this this vote counter. Her name is Ruby Friedman, and her, I think, mother, Shay Moss, or maybe the other way around. And they sue Rudy Giuliani for defamation because Rudy Giuliani pulls out this video of two poll workers pulling out mysterious votes from underneath the table in Fulton County. And those two poll watchers sue Giuliani because they were getting death threats or unalive threats from all of the Trump supporters that saw these videos. And then Rudy Giuliani says, yeah, I lied about those two poll watchers in that video, but it was my First Amendment right to do it, and I deny that they faced any damages because of it.
If there's a video of it, what about that makes it a lie?
Because because the video doesn't show that the box underneath the table is illegal votes. It doesn't. The video shows that there was votes underneath a table, but that's not fraud. That doesn't make fraud. You don't know what those votes are. Trump didn't know what those votes are. Giuliani didn't know what those votes are, and it turns out that those votes were just votes that were stored under the table. That's it.
I can see how that can be construed both ways. I can see that.
It can't.
Considering, yeah, I mean it can, but I got a question for you regarding the recent one. So what happened to, like, what was it, like 20 million voters that that won Biden in 2020 that just disappeared in this election? What was it, 20 or 40?
I don't remember the exact
It's
count,
evil.
but it's pretty easily explainable. One, people just weren't super motivated to vote for Kamala Harris. She ran a super weird campaign based off of, taking the reins from Joe Biden halfway through the campaign. People were hyper motivated to vote in 2020 because they didn't have anything better to do. They were like all at home. They had election day off, so they didn't have anything else to do but vote, and they were hyper incentivized to also cast mail-in ballots. Like the differential between votes in 2020 and 2024 are super easily explainable.
That's a huge margin for error, though. Like 20 to 40 million. That's a big number to sit there and say that many people didn't go vote. It's a pretty big margin.
Let's hear from the new person.
I don't think that Trump is an authoritarian by any means, but I think that with this recent election, that I'm not sure if it was something welcoming that Trump had to offer, or if it was more people rejecting like the hedonistic and power mad progressive agenda that was on the table. I think it was more the latter. When you talk about authoritarianism, there's a lot of things that the progressives have been pushing that I think the American culture rightly rejects.
So to that, I would say that the answer realistically as to why the left lost is because this was a hyper weird election where Kamala Harris didn't even have a whole full campaign because we had to pull Biden off for being like mentally ill, and because incumbent administrations were basically fucked from the start. Like if you're facing this much inflation due to stimulus spending, you're never going to get the will of the people because people don't know what the president can do.
I agree with you on that, but at the same time, that they had a rough time getting something organized from the get-go, and Biden wanted re-election. I understand those issues, but you don't think that there was other issues that the American people were rejecting?
Maybe, but I would say that any issue that a voter would see with the Democratic Party probably doesn't even hold a candle to one single thing that Trump did, and I think it mostly came down to inflation. I think if I were to take a wild guess at it, I'd say like 80% of it probably just came down to prices rising from inflation.
Yeah, I think that was a big part, but I think that there was other big parts too. I know that you're not under the belief that there was like this, and there is this agenda that's seemingly power mad, to use that term again.
I mean, it's hard to call Trump authoritarian whenever all of the media organizations in America are clearly left-wing biased. It's hard to call him authoritarian.
It's not hard at all, and I don't think that the media is nearly as biased against Trump as they should be.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Dude, there was a 2-week news story about him with 2 fucking scoops of ice cream. What are you talking about?
That's the problem, is that there was a 2-week news story on him getting 2 scoops of ice cream, but not a single mention of what an elector is or like what he tried to do around the 2020 election. When I say that they aren't as aggressive against Trump as they should be, it's that they're covering bullshit stories like the Stormy Daniels shit and not the actual attempt on our American democracy.
Well, have you considered
there you go. That was a good oil strike right there.
Have you considered that they don't have anything truly aggressive to go after Trump on? Like you talk about these.
Can you name some bad things Donald Trump has done, like legitimately?
Which, yeah, it's not a good look.
Trying to illegally overturn the election. That was like the worst thing that I've seen.
Besides that, like I'm talking.
Why besides that?
I'm talking.
Can I circle back to something?
Wait, no, real quick. We can't get to the point where we're talking about whose corporate tax policy is better whenever one of the people literally tried to disenfranchise the votes of 7 different states. We are not at the point where we can talk about anything else before we fully iron that point out. That the American people are just fine with either not knowing and not looking after it, or even worse, actually knowing that Donald Trump tried to disenfranchise 7 states to make himself the president again illegally, and then successfully argued to the Supreme Court that he should have blanket criminal immunity against those charges.
I think it's the human nature, and we're never going to get past this as a species, unlike like ants or something. But people don't give a shit about whatever powers are at be. They just like the leader, and if they don't like the leader, they're going to try to do something about it.
I agree.
So I don't know if we should be talking about whether or not Trump, overturned democracy or not. Let's just look at his policies. Can you name a bad policy he had that adversely affect you?
I mean, I could, but that we're not at the point where I would even want to talk about policy because
It sounds like you can't.
Because
I wanna bring
it's
up a point.
pointless. It's pointless. But yeah, go ahead, Eddie.
So to Evil Wizard, back to the leftist election fraud thing. Did you
Okay.
say there were 20 million who didn't vote this year
Oh,
opposed to
real
4
quick,
years ago?
real quick. I have to remove Evil Wizard, but you can come back up. There was a violation,
Oh,
so
no.
you can come back up if you want to, but I have to drop you down.
Did he say that there was 20 million people who didn't vote?
He was saying the difference between the amount of people that voted in 2020 and the amount of people that voted in 2024.
What were those?
There was
final
an almost indistinguishable. There was no difference almost. There was 150 million people voted 4 years ago. 150 million people voted this year.
He's asking why those voters moved from the Democratic Party to either not voting or to the Republican Party.
So I know we like to
Because
focus
those
on.
people probably did not research anything.
Yeah, it's inflation. I think. But go ahead. What is y'all doing? Go ahead.
So I just think that a lot of people like to focus on the bad that we've seen from Trump, right? And it's irrefutable. But I do want to address the situation that it's going both ways. And again, that there's this power machine that's running, and really trying to bring down the Trump's goals, which I think are opportunistic for the American people, for the Constitution. I don't think he has any will to destroy America or to change it fundamentally. He's trying to revert some of the corrupted and reckless things that have happened through history, and that's not like a current event. Like,
So what do you do?
and
So-
that's not to say that it's only Democrats that can be power hungry. You know, that's something that the American people always need to be watchful of. There's always going to be tyrants and power hungry people, and right now it seems to be on the left more so.
So the problem is, okay, I have two things to that. One, when you say that Donald Trump is trying to like uphold the Constitution, he's the only candidate that literally tweeted out floating the idea of terminating the Constitution. He's also the only one that proposed something like removing birthright citizenship, which literally flies in the face of the idea if you're born in America, you're an American, which is outlined in the Constitution. So, to be clear, he doesn't care about the Constitution. But also, I would say, can you name like one thing that a Democratic politician has done that even comes close to floating the idea of terminating the Constitution?
Well, for instance, I don't agree with the agenda they've been pushing with in the schools education system. I can't name a specific policy, but everything that's been going on with this woke ideology, everything that's been forced down our in our lives with all that, I don't agree with it. I don't
Okay,
think
let me
it's
let me
true.
ask a more pointed question. Can you name something that's as anti-American or as as authoritarian as Donald Trump literally saying that he'd be willing to terminate the Constitution to rerun the election?
I don't remember him saying anything like that, and I know he speaks off the cuff a lot, but he does respect the Constitution.
Okay,
And when
let me
Article 5 that he would be able to address Amendment 14, I think, but he would have to do that all legally. He knows that he can't just executively change the Constitution. That's
Well,
not- that's-
no, in the interview, he said that he wants to end birthright citizenship through executive power. So literally exactly what you said he doesn't want to do. He come out and said that he wants to do. But let me just read this tweet real quick. He tweeted out, so with the revelation of massive and widespread fraud and deception in working closely with big tech companies, the DNC and the Democratic Party, do you throw the presidential election results of 2020 out and declare the rightful winner, or do you have a new election? A massive fraud of this magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution.
Yeah, and I don't agree with that, and I'm glad the checks and balances.
Well,
Are
it
there-
should probably go beyond just disagreeing with it, because you can't I can't name a single thing from any politician on the right that even or on the left that even comes close to something like that. To the idea of terminating all rules, regulations, and articles in the Constitution to rerun the election that you lost.
Well, Joe Biden signed like 140 executive orders, I want to say day one of his new presidency. There's been a lot of power moved by the left that everybody wants to turn a blind eye to, but there's truth about them there, and the facts are all there, right? So I'm not saying that one party or the other is significantly greater, but right now I am distrustful of power, and I see the power tendencies that have been basically for my whole life running in this country, and I want that to change. Like,
This
I'm not
is-
even 40.
This is not an honest comparison. Like, I don't think you're acting like dishonestly or anything. I'm not trying to accuse you of bad faith, but like, whenever we say that Joe Biden signed 100 executive orders on the first day of his presidency, which is allotted to him in the Constitution, and that's one of the only things that the president can do unilaterally, to compare that to Donald Trump saying that he wants to use executive power to get rid of birthright citizenship, which is against the 14th Amendment, like, this is not even remotely the same.
though he says that, it doesn't give him that power. You know, I don't disagree that Trump says a lot of dumb things.
A lot of authoritarian things.
Yes, he might even say authoritarian things, but he is bound by the law, and I respect the law, and I don't think anybody gives him any credit.
But this is the problem, is that we're not arguing whether or not Donald Trump is bound by the law. We're arguing whether or not Trump is an authoritarian. And if he keeps constantly saying authoritarian things and expressing that he wants to do authoritarian things, why is it not fair to call him an authoritarian?
Well, there's many things that we're not talking about that he said that are quite contrary to authoritarianism and actions, right? So I can't lay it all down in front of you, but there are things you could look at that could make you think, okay, yeah, maybe he does have the people in mind, or you know, okay, that sounded a lot better than other things I've heard, right? So he is kind of an entertainer. He's got a loose tongue at times, and nobody will argue that with him. And he said foolish things, but I think generally he has the best intent for the people.
I think we're playing crazy cover up right here. I feel like we're framing this way more hyper, because even when we look at how you were framing Joe Biden doing something that's explicitly allotted to him in the Constitution of signing executive orders, which he was completely allowed to do and none of them were challenged. When we compare that to Donald Trump literally floating the idea of terminating the Constitution or putting the fate of the election in the vice president's hands, why are we like being hyper charitable in the way that we're framing all of Donald Trump's batshit ideas, but being hyper uncharitable about something that Joe Biden's completely allowed to do?
But Trump was trying to use the rules of that slate, which has been done in history. Now, we could argue that, you know, it wasn't for the same reasons or the right reasons, and I don't really want to get into it. I know it's a terrible thing. We're finding out new news about the federal agents that were involved in the different things.
It was nothing. That was nothing.
Well, you can say that, but Trump also offered 20,000 guardsmen, for instance.
So, okay. So when we say that there were FBI at the Capitol, you realize that we're just talking about, like, witnesses. We're talking about confidential human sources. We're not talking about FBI officers, right?
Well, that's the verbiage was interesting in that there was, I think, 3 names so far that were reporting directly to the FBI. So there was, yeah, they were dressed in civilian clothes or whatever, but there was direct correlation happening.
No. So I read the report. There were 26 confidential human sources. That just means somebody that reported information to the FBI. The FBI then sent 3 of them to further investigate the groups on January 6th, but there was an explicit order for them to not instigate any violence or commit any unlawful action. So to act like this is saying anything in regard to the FBI having some part in January 6th is not true.
Okay, well, I'd have to read more on it, and that's good. I really wouldn't want that from our government, which, again, I'm distrustful of power. I firmly believe in the Constitution and that we, the people, need to organize together to make sure we have pure and just leaders and are moving the country in the right direction, whatever that is. To me, I think it's more a morally truthful society to ourselves, and yeah, we could spin that a lot of ways.
It really feels like we're doing everything that we can to frame Donald Trump's actions in a hyper-charitable way, but only be distrustful. When you say you're distrustful of power, it feels like the only power that you're distrustful of is Joe Biden, because if you were actually distrustful of power, you would probably be concerned about the guy who just won his re-election campaign, who's saying that he wants to terminate the Constitution.
I don't think that's really what based on the other things I've heard him say, which has been not all of it, for sure, but some of it, you're right, and I don't generally get that message or vibe, and I think he's got a good managerial team around him. He's trying to build a different. He tried to play Mr. Politics too much last time. That's how I feel, and I do hope for the best, right? And I hope for the best with Biden. As for every president, I voted for Obama twice, and I won't say I'm pleased with those results, but that's what I chose, and yeah.
Of course, yeah. Of course, I hope for the best of the country, but I'm saying if we were actually being, because I consider myself an independent, but I'm going to come off as like a hyper Democrat, like insane person, because Donald Trump, cannot be defended. Like, if we were actually universally distrustful of power, like, I think that Hillary Clinton did some crazy shit and she should never step foot in your office. There's some stuff that I think Joe Biden should be further investigated on, but I can say that because I'm not like a hyper partisan. But when I say I'm distrustful of power, me having suspicions about Joe Biden doesn't come before what Donald Trump has told us. Donald Trump has said that he wants to be a dictator on day one. He said that all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution, could be justified terminating. He said that he wants to get rid of birthright citizenship
Welcome in,
via
Robert
executive
Simon.
action.
Right. He has a way of riling people up. I don't think anybody will argue that.
But it feels like we're like being hyper charitable in the way that we're phrasing it. Like the fact that I just laid out like 3 different things that are like hyper authoritarian, and you're saying, "Oh yeah, he likes to rile people up." Like, no, it goes way deeper than riling people up.
That certainly wasn't his focus. He didn't run a campaign on "I'm ready to be an authoritarian dictator," though he might have in a couple instances said something. So I'm not trying to be hyper charitable. I'm just trying to be reasonable to all of us. And when I don't want to sound like I'm so far right leaning that I could never see anything with an open mind. I don't want to be that person.
It just feels like if we were actually distrustful of power, we would probably, like, I don't think Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or even Hillary Clinton has said anything that would justify the amount of skepticism that Donald Trump has almost every time he opens his mouth. Like, even in his first interview as president-elect, he couldn't help but saying that he wouldn't stop Kash Patel from going against from prosecuting his list of people that he's going into FBI director looking after. Or he couldn't help but saying that he wants to use executive action to ban something that's explicitly approved of in the Constitution. Like, if we were actually fearful of corruption or of abuses of power, the Manafort pardon in in 2020 would have been a deal breaker for Donald Trump.
Right. Well, I hear you keep talking about this 14th Amendment thing. And the way I kind of look at that is if you look at somebody trying to bring that law to the table now, like it might have made sense whenever they amended that. But right now, if you brought that to the table, would anybody be behind it? It doesn't even make sense, to have like this birthright citizenship. If somebody's in the country on a visit or illegally or anything, that all of a sudden now they have some claim to citizenship, it's really a weird.
Wait, no, that's not what birthright just means. If you're born here, you're a citizen.
Right, and in most cases, how is that happening? Like, how is that happening? Obviously, citizens that are born here, like if a citizen has a baby here, that would make sense. But to just say that anybody born here, even if you're on a trip, it's really a weird law. That would be my argument. I'm not arguing about what he said as right or wrong. I would just look at it constitutionally. That is a weird amendment. And I don't know when it.
But doesn't it feel a little weird that when Donald Trump says he wants to use executive action to get rid of essentially part of the Constitution, what we say isn't, "Oh, that's crazy because I'm skeptical of power." What we say is, "Well, that amendment is a little strange." Like,
I've said crazy things before too that I probably didn't put much thought into, right? Like,
yeah, but you're not the president.
I get that, but even presidents are people. They have flaws, right?
But Donald Trump shouldn't just be like flying off the wing and like saying that he actually maybe we should terminate the Constitution. Just kidding. Like that should not be. We've lowered the bar of what the president should be so far to accommodate Donald Trump. Like, if someone like Obama said that we should get rid of something that violated the any amendment by executive order, he would be fucking impeached. We're not. It's such a hyper clear double standard. Like, why are we justifying terminating parts of the Constitution by executive order because the amendment's weird? Or why are we justifying the president saying he wants to do it because he just says some shit that he actually doesn't believe?
Perhaps he meant by executive order, he meant executive power, that if Congress enacted an adjustment, as I think the 5th article would detail, that he would use his executive power to sign it into law, right? Maybe that's I can't speak for the man, right? But I understand how the verbiage and the communication at times is tough to handle. I think it's hilarious how he can talk for an hour or two at times on things that probably could have been expressed in 10 minutes, but it is part of his character. And I guess that is what it is, right?
I agree. It is what it is because he's the president now, but it just feels like Donald Trump is working on the biggest double standard I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you mean exactly by double standard, but
In that, if
He's
Joe
gotta
Biden
be
said said something an eighth as bad as anything that Donald Trump has ever said, he would be like removed from office.
I mean, he's said some weird things, and you know, you look at his recent pardons. I don't think that's protection for his son. It's protection for himself. There was lots of issue. Like if the media would have brought to attention his laptop, Trump would probably be on his way out of the
Okay,
office.
so
and-
let's focus on the pardon. I agree that the pardon of Hunter Biden was bad. I don't approve of him doing the blanket pardon for Hunter Biden. But then, on the other side, I would expect this from you. How do you feel about the Roger Stone pardon from Donald Trump?
You'd have to kind of inform me a little more on Roger Stone, and he got. I'm assuming he got a pardon by Trump at the end of his
Yeah, so
last term. What if,
Roger Stone was found guilty of lying to Congress in relation to the probes from the Mueller report. So he was lying to Congress and the FBI in relation to coordinating leaks with Julian Assange from the Russian government. And Donald Trump pardoned him for lying to the FBI and Congress about that investigation.
and what?
But like, isn't it weird that we're hyper focusing on the Hunter Biden pardon, but we never look into anything that Donald Trump has ever done?
I didn't mean to hyper focus. I merely brought it up. And it's fair for you to bring up a separate pardon, right?
That is worse.
Is it though?
Yes.
Like, or are they on the same ground?
No, it's not on the same ground. Hunter Biden was found guilty of tax evasion,
Well,
let's not forget that the House and different prosecutors have been investigating the link between Hunter Biden and Joe Biden for 8 years and found nothing. So comparing that to something that that to what happened with Trump and Roger Stone, where Roger Stone was lying to Congress about an investigation into Donald Trump in relation to coordinating with the Russian government.
what exactly did he lie about? I wonder.
He was lying to Congress about coordinating leaks with Julian Assange about the DNC and Hillary Clinton's emails.
So what is that? What is that exactly? What did he?
Do you remember the WikiLeaks stuff?
Vaguely.
So, Roger Stone was a part of Donald Trump's election campaign, and he was coordinating info dumps with the person running WikiLeaks, and he lied to Congress about it.
And these WikiLeaks were spreading some kind of false information, and he just lied.
They were Russian hacked information that was being spread about John Podesta and the DNC, I think.
Interesting. Interesting.
But there's never any attention paid to that. And whenever anybody brings anything even remotely close to that up, they just say Russia, 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 and hand wave it away.
Yeah, I feel like there's been a lot of lies before Congress, and I'm not trying to play favoritism.
But yeah, to be clear, there hasn't been a lot of lies before Congress by people trying to cover up for the president, and then the president pardoning that person. That's not something that we see often.
So how is the guy Rogers tied to Trump in this collusion with Russia through Australian-led WikiLeaks?
So Roger Stone was a part of Donald Trump's election campaign in 2016.
Okay.
So that's how it was related.
And that guy is tied to WikiLeaks?
He was coordinating information drops with Julian Assange.
Okay. And Julian Assange is tied to Russia.
Is tied to WikiLeaks, who was getting their information from a Russian hack.
Interesting. So it's kind of like a smear campaign that he pardoned him for?
He pardoned him because he was lying to Congress about investigations in relation to it.
So he was trying to protect himself with lies, which is morally wrong, but his whole agenda was to smear the Democrats. Yeah,
I won't even speak to what his motivations were. It's just true that he was coordinating leaks from a Russian hacker, with somebody who he then lied about coordinating those leaks with. That's all it comes down to.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't look good. I don't know what he was sentenced, how long he was sentenced.
Well, he wasn't sentenced to anything because Donald Trump pardoned him.
Yeah, pardoned. Okay. Well, I would say fortunate for that man that he. I don't like that he lied before Congress. I don't like even that he was tied to the WikiLeaks guy was trying to. It looks bad. But
I'd say just to be clear, I'm not trying to like hyper attack you either. I think this is a problem with the media, and I was talking to the other guy about that too, where it's just that when I say that the media is like hyper lenient on Donald Trump, it's that they focus on shit that doesn't matter at all. Like, I don't care that he paid a porn star to have sex with her. I don't care. I don't care that he put 2 scoops of ice cream on his ice cream cone. I don't care. Like, they're covering the absolute tip of the iceberg when it comes to Donald Trump, when he's pardoning people coordinating on behalf of his campaign with Russian hackers. He's pardoning someone who was doing illegal lobbying in the U.S. On behalf of a Ukrainian pro-Russian leader in Paul Manafort. He literally led I don't want to be too controversial, but like, he tried to illegally overturn the election, and we know it. We have all of the documents supporting that. We literally have his vice president saying that Donald Trump asked him to put the Constitution in front of him, or him in front of the Constitution. Like, we have so much to cover on Donald Trump that is so damning, but for some reason we focus on all the dumb bullshit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to kind of exact that, he tried to legally overturn it with the slate and use this rule, but was it right? Was it true?
Well, it was. So the thing that he was trying to do with the alternate electors was a violation of the Electoral Count Act, and John Eastman knew it, and Donald Trump knew it, and Greg Jacob knew it, and Mike Pence knew it, and that's why Mike Pence didn't go through with it.
Yeah, it didn't go down. The whole thing was weird. It was a weird time of our American history. I agree.
It was weird because Donald Trump was asking the vice president to break the Electoral Count Act.
Yeah, that doesn't make it any better, right?
Right. Okay. Just making sure we're on the same ground.
No, I mean, I'm never going to say that was the greatest act he's ever done, right? I think that he had his reasons for belief of why he thought he was doing the right thing, or why the election was, I stayed up that night, not the whole night, but it looked like it was in the bag, and I was voting for him last time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, cool. And then when I got up in the morning, everything had changed, and whether that was all legit or not, I'm not in position to say. I wasn't anywhere. I mailed in my ballot. I have no idea what happened. Had all these polls and all these systems. So
then the question is why don't you trust the people who are in positions to say, like the DHS who investigated it and found nothing, or all the judges who ruled against Donald Trump, or all of the independent auditors that the Trump campaign hired to recount the votes that found that Joe Biden won by bigger margins than they thought before.
Yep. There was a lot of things there I could touch on, but like judges, for instance, I think that our country has a huge issue with judges. I think even the Supreme Court judges, I was examining my Constitution, and it doesn't say that they have a lifetime appointment. They have an appointment for good behavior. I suppose you can interpret that as you want, but there's certain Supreme Court justices that haven't had good behavior. I think all Americans who are fundamentally secure in their thought know in a moment what good behavior is, and if it's contrary to that, it's misbehavior, and we've seen plenty of that. That's why we the people need to wake up. We really do.
Yeah, I agree, but I don't think we mean the same thing.
I can kind of feel that. I just I know we're on opposite sides of the line, so to speak, but yeah, I'm more of an independent mind. I'm not leaning towards a lot of what has been pushed the last decades, I'll say.
Mm.
I'll circle back to the debt. I really am worried for this country because we spent so much money. When I was in 4th grade, I did a project. We had hit $4 trillion. What social studies, like current event. I did a current event. I brought up the article, and the whole newspaper, the local newspaper, had Uncle Sam just dipping below his nose in water. And he was holding up money, a fistful of money, and his top hat was it. But that was $4 trillion. And I'm not an old man yet. I mean, I'm getting there, but I'm in my 30s. But the whole concept of us spending money so recklessly is really beyond my generation, let alone the newer generations. Like, they don't know anything but this debt, and it's a terrifying thing. I mean, there was a president that zeroed out our debt, and I think our country's being very reckless, and so many people have this idea that money comes from nothing, when money is just, you have to create it. It's a creation of wealth. You have to farm it. You have to build it. You have to create it, right? And people seem to be missing that point. You can't just keep selling yourself bonds and securities and going forever into debt. That's not how money works. In 1999, we missed by one vote a law that would have been passed. I think it was an amendment that would have made Congress have a balanced budget. And I was heartbroken. I was a young man then, and barely into politics, but I remember really rooting for that, and it didn't happen.
So I would agree that in general we should be more responsible with our budget, but this is a bipartisan issue. Like no matter who you voted for, Kamala Harris would have been terrible for it. Donald Trump would have been terrible for it. Donald Trump's not going to do anything to fix it. Kamala Harris wouldn't have done anything to fix it. It's just like a pipe dream.
He said something today or yesterday where he was what was the word he used? He wanted to bring back. It was basically wealth. He used a fancier word. But prosperity. His whole goal is to bring prosperity back to the American people, and his ideas of getting basically the government out of our pockets, I think are more in line with my idea of what would be correct. The government has swelled up, so to speak. There's lots of bureaucratic stuff I've been reading about that, like an agency will be legally created, and then they'll go out of their way after their money is assigned and decide, I also want to do this within my budget. And they'll start doing things that wasn't enacted by law, which is in its own way unconstitutional, and that's kind of what they're trying to rein in with the DOGE or whatever.
Yeah, Doge.
Yeah. So I'm excited to hopefully see, these people not be hungry for power, because I think that's truly what they're after, is to eliminate some of these powers that are being stolen from the people. And maybe that's a hope. Maybe that's me. Being too faithful in them, but that's truly my desire and where my vote went.
So the thing that I'd point out is that, like, this is something that Donald Trump is really good at. He's really good at using like sexy language, and making people perceive it as policy. So like whenever he says, I want to bring prosperity back, and I want to end the needless federal bureaucracies, and I want to balance our debt more, it's like, that sounds good, but realistically, I'd have to see how it unfolds, but I generally don't think that Doge is going to be super successful. And if so, all of the bad that comes from that is going to wildly outweigh the good. And it's basically to distract from the fact that he wants to engage in the largest mass deportation event in American history, which is going to cost a fuck ton. He's going to wildly decrease federal income by giving all of these super rich people tax cuts, where like the federal income is going to be wildly lower. He's been floating getting rid of income tax to replace it with tariffs, which would absolutely slash federal income. So if we're looking to not have debt, what we're looking at is spending a fuck ton on a huge needless mass deportation, but also slashing a bunch of federal money making by killing a lot of the three-letter agencies, by deporting immigrants who pay more into the government than they take, by like doing all of these, by like huge tax cuts for the most rich. Like, if we're talking about lowering the debt, what we want to see is either proportionally increasing federal income and lowering federal spending, or decrease, or like the other way around. But right now what we're seeing is Donald Trump is trying to decrease federal funding and also decrease federal spending.
Yes, because the country makes.
But we're also we're cutting the federal funding, so like it's a pipe dream.
Yeah, I can understand how it looks like a pipe dream, but our country doesn't have a income problem; it has a spending problem. So,
but Donald Trump's going to make an income problem.
Potentially, I think he had something in line where he wanted everybody to have to. It was almost like a sales tax that would incorporate state and federal or something.
Yeah.
But I don't know a lot about that just yet. We'll see how. I would love to not be taxed to death personally, but the thing I'll say about immigration, and I know that would have an immediate impact on the economy, but there are direct correlation studies that show that when you have this immigration in, it keeps wage growth stagnant. So companies will then be able to sort of have their in a way, a slavery trade. They'll be able to have this cheaper labor and have people that won't complain as much because they're coming from different places. So there's studies that are showing that when you have this kind of immigration that's unbound, that it actually drives down wage growth, which is bad for the people, right?
But when we're looking at, so I brought up immigration specifically to talk about the deficit. So when we're talking about where we're talking about engaging in a huge mass deportation, which we're going to need to spend tons of money in order to go through with, and deporting those immigrants who pay more into the federal government than they take.
In some
We are
cases,
just
yeah.
looking at, well, in like statistically, that immigrants, legal and illegal, pay more into the government than they take. Or actually, no, I don't know about legal, but at the very least, illegal immigrants, the ones that he's talking about getting rid of, they pay more into the government than they take. That's just repeated in study after study after study.
But they're not incorporating like the medical cost on the system because they now have availability through the ACA and different systems that allow them to go and have something done, and then they just stiff the bill. You know, there's other things.
I would assume that they would take that into account.
I would assume, but some of the stuff I read is they were largely being ignorant of that, and if that's true to a fullest degree, I have no idea.
Well, because if they were taking money from the ACA, why would they say that they're taking more money or they're giving more money than they take if they're not considering all of the money that they take? Like, why would they even make that claim?
Well, there's all kinds of different tax programs that they're benefiting to people that are here, documented or undocumented citizens, however you want to refer to them. But are those all calculated as well versus their taxes? Because when you look at social programs, I could switch gears to like men versus women right now. You see that men are having their power taken from them by the courts and the system, moving their money from a man's hands to the woman's. And that's having a correlation on society. Birth rates are dropping. Men's value, their money, is being taken, and women are getting allotted more, not only directly from men's pockets in the case of alimony and child supports, but also women collect a lot more from the system and WIC and child or food stamps and different housing programs. So there's there's a lot of issues that you can look at with social programs that are impacting society. And I think when you look at immigration, those have some little hidden values as well.
Maybe, and we'd have to go through the specific methodology of the study that I'm referencing, which I mean we can do, but I can't. I'm tired. I'm probably not going to be up for that much late, or that late enough to do that. But just to focus on the point that I was trying to get at is that inarguably, getting rid of these illegal immigrants, at most charitably, I would be willing to give you it's a net negative, or it's a net zero. Like, we're not gaining or losing anything in regard to federal spending by deporting all of these illegal immigrants.
I can match that. Yeah.
That's I'll give you that to be charitable. But we're also spending boatloads of money to get them all out by hiring new ICE officers, by hiring new immigration judges. Where we're spending so much money to get all of these people out for seemingly nothing. If our goal was to start working at less of a deficit, why would we vote for the person who's running primarily on that?
I think that the whole concept is that America is a sovereign nation, and we can have immigrants here, but they got to go through it the right way. You can't just have everybody flooding. No economy in the world can maintain that. And again, I kind of deflect to wage stagnation. It's been terribly slow under Biden, and I saw some improvement under Trump. And there was some bad things when they had to sign the bipartisan CARES Act. I didn't think that was really healthy. I didn't think they needed to give that kind of money out, but
this is moving off of the. I think this is still moving off of the point. If we're voting for Donald Trump to lower the deficit, why would we expect him to lower the deficit if the main thing that he was running on does the exact opposite?
Well, that's not exactly true just yet, and we saw that he had some pretty good growth in the country. So when you see growth, and you're cutting taxes, and then you're
but we also saw him spend more than Joe Biden more than Joe Biden in his first term.
Sure.
I watched those numbers personally to be close. I don't think it was more than Biden. I'd have to double check. I saw Biden was. No.
Yes.
But then again, you got to keep in mind that he had the whole COVID thing, and
so did Joe Biden.
Well, Joe Biden, it kind of ended, and some people.
No.
But also Donald Trump had 3 years without COVID. So if it's not a totally unfair comparison when Donald Trump had 1 year to deal with COVID, and Joe Biden had all 4 of his years feeling the effects of COVID.
Right. All right. Well, I do think that he'll make progress. Like you said, he's got big plans with tariffs, which America has treated very poorly. Trump made progress with NATO, which, again, when you see European nations already recognizing what Trump's about to do, because this is a European war in Ukraine, and here's America bleeding money towards that when this is in Europe. Like, why wouldn't NATO be stepping up and paying their tab? We're paying more of a percentage with a larger GDP, and for what?
Do you think we
No,
should
it's,
keep supporting Ukraine?
Well, I know Trump does. I personally am anti-war. I don't like what Russia's doing. I don't think the world needs war to thrive, but obviously that's a big part of human history. I won't say humanity, but definitely human history.
Okay. Well, I think I'm gonna end the live here because I'm getting tired.
Hey, yeah,
this is my first live, so I was just testing stuff out. But I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, me too. I got this app about a month ago, so I'm pretty new here.
Well, if you drop me a follow, I'll follow you back, and you're welcome back up whenever I host these lives.
Are you going to bed right after this?
Probably. Well, maybe not straight after this, but I'm gonna. It's relax time. It's no more politics.
No more calling, Eddie.
That's a good call.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming up.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Oh, well, at least if I talked to 2 groypers, I had 1 person who has at least had a normal head on their shoulders.
Yeah. Pretty respectful. I do not understand what verbiages are, but you know what? We live, we love, we lie.
Yeah. All right. Well, good night. Good night, Eddie. Good night to the no one else watching. Okay.
I'm still watching. Don't do it.